Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen demands that OP saves her house. Am I the jerk for not helping my daughter to save her house? A few years ago, my husband and I were proud to co-sign for our daughter, who's 27, to help her buy her first house. We were happy to help, and despite not having a lot of money ourselves, we bought her a washer and a dryer for her new home. I called in to check with her regularly and to see how things were going and if she needed anything. I know she changed jobs mid-year, and I wanted to make sure that she'd still be okay financially. She assured me that she was okay and everything was fine. We started noticing inconsistencies around Christmas when our credit score took a hit due to 2 late payments on our house. Our daughter told us it was just a mix-up with the bank since a new bank took over her mortgage and she would sort it all out. A few months later, it still had not been corrected, so I called our daughter again. Something seemed off, so I called the bank since my name was on the loan, and I found out that my daughter was 6 months behind on the mortgage. When confronted, she said the new job wasn't working out, so she quit back in December and hadn't been able to find a new job. I thought this was strange since we taught her to not quit a job until you have a new one in place to be responsible. I also asked her why she hadn't come to us, and she said that she was embarrassed. We gave her some leads on new jobs because we couldn't afford to pay the full amount she owed on the house at this point and suggested she get a roommate, and if she could get those things done, we would see what we could do. It was a couple of months before she found a job. I don't think she even looked into the leads that we gave her, but still had no roommate to help with the bills. At this point, we found out from her grandfather that she had taken a large sum of money from him during that first year, over $20,000, and had just asked him for more money, but he said he was sorry and he didn't have any more to give. We still have no idea what she did with any of the money, and she never told us about this. Our daughter continued lying to us about paying the bills and has not done anything to help herself or save her home. The mortgage company said they sent her documents for a hardship extension, which she never returned. We finally made the decision to not take money out of our retirement, which was our only option since our credit scores were now in the toilet because of this and we cannot get a loan, to save the house. This was not an easy decision to make, but we made it mostly because she had not tried to help herself at all and lied to us over and over again for more than a year. We told her that she could come stay with us until she gets back on her feet. She not only declined, but stopped talking to us not long after that. This was not an easy decision, but if we had saved her house, we likely would have lost our own. Are we the jerks? Not the jerk. Save your own credit. Your daughter is being dodgy. Where did the $20,000 from her grandfather go? She should be returning that instead of asking for more. She's ruining your credit and dragging you down with her through her irresponsible actions. You need to find out what she's been up to that's dragging the whole family down and put a stop to it. My wife stopped wearing her wedding ring multiple days in a row. For context, I, 33 male, have been married to my wife, who's 32, for a little less than a year. However, we have been in a stable, exclusive relationship for 10 years and we've been living together for 8. She is the love of my life. She proposed to me about 6 years ago. I said yes, but we ended up having to postpone our wedding several times due to our school schedules, venue cancellations, etc. We've been wearing wedding bands ever since the proposal. 2 days ago, she came home from shopping and said that the cashier was hitting on her and possibly asked her out. I'm not threatened by other men hitting on her since our relationship has a very strong foundation and we usually find it comical. However, she mentioned that she did forget to wear her wedding ring band, and that's possibly why the cashier was flirtatious with her. Yesterday, we were planning on going to see a movie. As we were walking out the door, I noticed that she was not wearing her ring again. I asked, in an admittedly not pleasant tone, "So, do you not wear your wedding ring in public anymore?" She was kind of taken aback and said no, she just forgot to put it on, and went and put it on before we left. The rest of the day, things were a bit tense, but we ended up seeing the movie and thought we enjoyed it. However, once we got back to the car, her attitude clearly shifted. I asked how she was doing, and she said, "I have a headache because of you." She then explained how she didn't appreciate me bringing up her not putting on her wedding ring, that she's human and made a mistake and forgot to put it on. I was just like, okay, that's fine. But then she continued, clearly upset, saying that she's an attractive woman and she can't help it if people hit on her and ask her out. I was like, okay, that's true, but if she was wearing her ring, that would probably prevent people from asking her out. She said that the cashier probably wouldn't have seen it and would have asked her out anyways, and that she as a person is not defined by whether she wears the ring or not. We drove home in mostly silence, but she did apologize that she snapped at me in the car, which I accepted. I want to emphasize that we do not have any previous trust issues, and I am in no way insinuating that she has been intentionally not wearing her ring. This is also the first time I noticed it, which I probably wouldn't have if she didn't mention her interactions with the cashier at the grocery store the day before. However, I am a bit startled by how defensive she got in the car and don't really know how to process what happened. I'd greatly appreciate it if y'all could share any insights you may have regarding yourself or your partner not wearing wedding rings in public. Update. Actually had work to do, so I stopped replying. I think many people missed the whole context of my post, how we've been wearing wedding bands for 6 years. Wedding was postponed due to our school schedules. It's clear that I absolutely used the wrong tone and wording when I asked her whether she doesn't wear the ring. I'm going to apologize for that right away. I've learned that most people don't wear their wedding bands. People keep talking about diamonds getting snagged, rings being bulky. This whole thing is regarding simple wedding bands. That being said, we never actually established how we felt about wearing the rings, and I have just assumed over the years that we both wore them equally. I'm going to ask what her feelings are towards the rings. I honestly didn't know that not wearing rings was so commonplace, and I'm actually not totally against wearing them less. I'm still worried about her defensiveness. I strongly do believe and hope that this was a product of the poor way I treated her prior to leaving the house. If it's something else, we'll have to play it from there. Update. My main takeaways were that my passive-aggressive comment at the start of the day was uncalled for and likely overshadowed the rest of our date. This likely contributed to the tense and defensive word exchange later in the day. I also had no idea that so many married couples did not wear their wedding bands. My parents never took their rings off, and I figured that's how it was with everyone. Clearly, that's not at all representative of the diverse array of ring-wearing standards across individual relationships and even individual spouses. Finally, I suppose I was naive thinking that wearing a wedding ring would deter people from hitting on my wife. When I was single, I would always double-check if there was a ring on someone's finger before pursuing. I think someone is a real jerk if they knowingly hit on someone that's married. My wife came home from work. I work from home, and we sat down for dinner. I started the conversation first by apologizing for my tone and snarky question the day before. She said thank you and accepted. I then said that I was triggered hearing her tell me that she was hit on by the cashier and her explaining that it may have been due to her not wearing her ring. She asked me whether I wanted her to tell me when people flirted with her. I said sure, but it's up to you. I assume that this happens frequently because she's so beautiful. We hugged it out. I then asked her why she got so defensive in the car after the movie. She said she wasn't feeling great and that she didn't like me insinuating that it was her fault she got hit on and that she sometimes forgets to put her ring on. I apologized again and acknowledged that even though we've been together a decent amount of time, we never actually discussed what we wanted the value of our rings to represent. I actually suggested that I'd be okay wearing them less if that was more comfortable. She said that no, she wanted to still wear them out in public, just that I need to understand that people forget things like this and it's normal. End of story, we're on good terms, and she thanked me for bringing the topic up again so we could work things out together. My husband of 6 weeks says he wants to be single. We've been together for 9 happy years. My partner, 31 male, and I, 28 female, have been together for almost 9 years. We always had the best relationship, full of love and joy. We had shared visions of the future and a very similar financial and ambitious mindset. We fought here and there, but in those 9 years, we never had any major conflict. We both love each other's families and they love us. Everyone always said they were jealous of our relationship because it seemed so effortless, and it was. We got married about 6 weeks ago, and everything leading up to that point seemed fine. We had a wonderful wedding day and both read heartfelt vows and cried during the ceremony. I had no reason to believe anything was wrong. About 2 weeks after the wedding, we started talking more about the honeymoon, which we planned to take later in the year, and other plans, and he seemed very uneasy with making future plans, started saying that we shouldn't rush and that we just got married and to take it easy. I didn't understand why, as I wasn't rushing anything, and this was the plan we had both agreed to earlier, to have the honeymoon about 7 months after the wedding. Eventually, he told me that the whole marriage thing is freaking him out, and he's realizing that maybe it's not something he really wanted for himself, that he's feeling weird that we've been together all throughout our 20s and that I'm the only relationship he has ever had, and he never had enough time to be single. He says he maybe proposed out of societal pressures and because he felt that that's just what you're supposed to do. He says I'm perfect and he loves me, but just wishes that we had met 5 years later so he would have had that time to be on his own. I said those are all valid feelings, but what are the options here? It's okay to mourn the past, but we're already married. He said he had some doubts before the wedding, but felt it was already too late as so many people had money in it and I was so excited about it, and he didn't want to crush my dreams. In hindsight, we both agreed it would have been better had he mentioned it then. We've now been discussing this for a month. No fights, we just both end up getting very emotional. Have tried individual and couples therapy, and I left the house for a couple of weeks just to give us both some mental space. We agreed we were still together during that time frame though. When I came back, he ended up asking for a break where we were both single for a few months, then reconvene at an agreed upon date and see where we are. I was completely shocked by this and told him that I don't believe in that. We either figure it out together or we break up for good. I asked if there's anything else we can do within the relationship to try and get him to a better mental state, and he said he didn't think so. He really feels the only option for us is to not be together right now. I'm completely devastated and blindsided by this. I think he's either going through some sort of grass is greener syndrome, where he's wondering what else is out there and mourning not being single for longer. But if he does end up going on dates and realizing it's not as good as he thought, I don't want him to think that I will be waiting on the sidelines as a safety net. This may or may not be related. I asked him if there's someone else. He said no, but he's been spending some time with a female friend he met at the gym a couple of months ago. They work out together 2 to 3 times a week, which I don't usually have a problem with. He's a big gym guy and very social, and he has had other female workout buddies before with no issues. However, he has also started spending time with her after the workout, grabbing a coffee or a meal together, and being shifty about it with me. This is new for him. While I don't think anything physical has happened, I definitely think there's some emotional cheating there, and I wonder if this has impacted his thoughts at all. He swears she has nothing to do with the way he's been feeling and that he's been feeling this way for a while, which I do believe, but maybe this has intensified his feelings. He still tells me he loves me every day and is very affectionate with me. He's also apologetic about the way he feels, saying he wishes he didn't feel this way and he realizes how unfair it is to me. I can't imagine giving up 9 years of our history together, especially when we just had such a beautiful wedding that everyone was so excited about. But the way he has been acting for the last month is so unlike him and doesn't seem at all like the person I have been with all these years. Is this salvageable at all? Confirmed, he is 100% cheating, which sucks, but it was also vindicating and actually makes me feel better about the gut feeling I had about the girl. Thank you all so much for the kind comments and messages I received. It's been so helpful to read similar stories and to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. The next few months will be rough, but I have hope that I will come out better on the other side. My BFF had the same thing happen to her about 2 weeks after they bought a house. He was fine after the wedding, but homeownership made him realize his youth was over. He met a woman at work and suddenly wanted to take a break, but he wanted to keep her on the sideline so he could come back to someone who loved him when the other woman didn't think he was so great. I'll tell you what I told her. You deserve more than being a backup plan. Extricate yourself from this relationship now. The past 9 years don't matter. What matters is how he's treating you now. You deserve to be someone's first choice. Everyone does. Let him go and move on so you can find someone who values what they have when they have it. By the way, my BFF left that husband and found the love of her life, a man who really loved her so much more than her ex ever did. As for the ex, he did hook up with the coworker who dumped him 4 months later. He then went on to have a couple more ex-wives. Mom splits work with the nanny to save a few dollars and ends up back paying hundreds. Karen and Ken are wealthy and extremely stingy. Their kid is Bob. Henry is an extremely sweet, generous single dad who lost his husband a few years ago and dotes on his kid Steve. I've been a nanny for several years now, and for the most part, I've worked with lovely, reasonable families. I have contracts for every family that guarantees the hours that I work, meaning if a family goes on vacation, I still get paid because I'm technically available to work, but they chose not to use my services. Think gym membership where you pay regardless of whether you've been to the gym in a month. This is standard on nanny contracts. Another bit on my contract is called the nanny share. So if 2 of the families want to combine for the day, each of them pays 2/3 of my regular pay rate. I get paid a little more for watching more kids, and they save a little, only paying a portion of what they would have paid. Karen and Ken's family went to Hawaii 3 weeks ago, and per my contract, I was to be paid as usual. Before they left, they asked if I could come in and watch Bob the Sunday after they returned so that they could recover and rest. I agreed, and my hours were set at 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. that Sunday. They went on the trip, everything was wonderful, and they texted me when they landed saying they would see me at 8 a.m. The next day, when I was about to head out the door at 7:30 a.m., I received a text saying that Bob was just waking up, so I should show up at 8:30 instead. After the day of nannying, Karen asked me if I would stay past my regular hours during the upcoming week so that they could have 2 date nights. I agreed, and Karen said she would reimburse me for all the extra hours at the end of the week since it'd be easier just to make one payment. Totally fine with me. The week finished, and I ended up staying an extra 8 hours total for the 2 date nights. I asked Ken to pay me for the 16 hours, but he said he had to talk to Karen first to double check, and he would pay me shortly. When I got home, I received a text from Karen saying, "Hi OP, thank you so much for covering for us these past few weeks. Ken and I are feeling refreshed, and the show was hilarious. Since we were in Hawaii, you were paid for an entire week while you weren't working. We don't think this is quite fair, as it is a large sum of money, so we'd like to apply some of those hours to your babysitting today and yesterday. We will pay you for 8 hours instead." I was furious. I screenshotted the part of my contract that plainly stated I would be paid for any hours that their family was on vacation, and I reminded her that it was in violation of contract. She reluctantly agreed, and I texted that it would be a total of 16 hours. Karen instantly replied and went off, texting, "On Sunday, we asked you to come in at 8:30, not 8. We are already being generous and paying you for the holiday we took. We expect you to track your hours better next time. This is unacceptable. You need to be as accurate as possible with the hours that we are paying you. We will pay you for 15.5 hours. This was a difference of $12.50. I was going to screenshot the part of my contract that said any rescheduling needed a 24-hour notice, but instead, I went nuclear. Bob has been tagging along with Steve and me to music class and soccer twice a week outside of Karen's regular contracted hours since January. Karen has never offered to pay for those hours, but Henry was fine with paying his full rate for those hours because Steve was having trouble making friends at school and had become close to Bob. I chose not to say anything about the slight bump in pay because I loved watching them play together. Malicious compliance time. As Karen stated, I needed to be as accurate as possible. I calculated all the hours that Bob has joined us since January, 6 hours a week times 18 weeks, and the total amount that they owed was almost $2,000. In the group chat with Karen, Ken, and Henry, I said, Karen stated that it was of utmost importance that I track the hours as accurately as possible, so I took it upon myself to double-check everything, including the share hours. Thank goodness I did. I didn't realize we had forgotten to track all the hours that Bob joined us for soccer and music. Henry, I'm so sorry. Karen actually owes you quite a bit of money. If my calculations are correct, they owe this amount to you and to me. Henry replied, Karen and Ken, I'm so disappointed to hear that OP hasn't been compensated properly this entire time. I don't need my hours to be refunded for these hours because I wanted Steve to continue his playdates, but you need to pay OP's portion immediately. I got a huge chunk of money that I wasn't expecting, and I'm now on the hunt for my next nanny family. I'll be putting my 2 weeks notice with Karen and Ken as soon as I do. Father-in-law feels owed time with grandkids. My father-in-law lives in our town, and for the past few years, since my husband and I moved here and had kids, we've seen him regularly, at least weekly, and allowed him to be a part of many family events, Christmas morning, trick-or-treating, etc. The problem is, I can't stand him, and I think recently the fact that he's a perpetual part of my life is getting to me. My husband and I talk about this at length and really don't know how to handle it, as he is constantly applying pressure to see us, and when he doesn't hear from us, even for a few days, he makes a stink. I'd love to know what those who have local grandparents have in terms of expectations for time spent. Now for details. Off the bat, it's important to share that undoubtedly, my 34 female father-in-law, who's 78, is a textbook narcissist. He was a terrible husband and father. He turned my brother-in-law, who's 44, into a huge narcissist with depression and other mental health challenges, and he cheated on my mother-in-law. Because they divorced after that, my husband miraculously ended up really unscathed and had a great childhood and fine relationship with his dad, likely due to his mother shielding him and playing the role of primary caregiver. In fact, father-in-law somehow managed to remain a part of everyone's lives, having some custody of my husband. Brother-in-law was an adult by the time of the split, combining holidays with my mother-in-law and her new husband, and just generally being around. When I first met my husband, father-in-law was in a new relationship with a woman who was wonderful. This was after 3 failed marriages, my mother-in-law being his third, and a long-term partnership of 18 years. When you first meet him, he seems like a character more than anything. Very grandiose, clearly thinks he's charming and full of anecdotes. Anyone who gets to know him, however, finds that the anecdotes are all the same and tired, and he can actually be quite rude, domineering of conversations, selfish and stingy. His girlfriend broke up with him after 8 years, which at first seemed like a shock to us, but quickly was not at all that surprising, given how much better she was than him. She explained the breakup to him well, that for all his good qualities, she simply can't handle his bad ones anymore, in particular how he acts in public, being rude, stingy, and extra pompous. The breakup devastated him, and while he initially seemed to reflect on the feedback she gave, it quickly became her fault for the split, and he, being entirely alone in his life, became increasingly needy and more present in our lives than I had ever known him to be. We had just had our first, and at the time, we weren't able to offer him as much company as my brother-in-law was able to. He became increasingly codependent with my brother-in-law, spending many evenings at his house late into the night, attending parties my brother-in-law hosted, and even vacationing with brother-in-law and his family. Now, brother-in-law can also get irritated at his dad, and their relationship is on a constant roller coaster of fighting and being attached at the hip. I'm sure there were complex psychological reasons for why, but husband and I later realized that his motivation was at least partially financial. We realized this when we found out that our father-in-law bought a vacation home in an area brother-in-law loves and put brother-in-law's name on the deed. Now that situation could be an entirely different post, but very quickly a fight ensued. Brother-in-law cut off all contact with father-in-law, they sold the house, and 2 years later still have not spoken. This left father-in-law with no one except for us. We tried to keep the same cadence of visits with him that we always had, weekly or so, dinners or quick visits with the kids. However, driven largely by the fact that he really is alone, the requests to see us have done nothing but increase. Our ability to tolerate him waxes and wanes over time. It's also important for me to share the ways he's guilting us to see him. First is the explicit, shameless guilt. Haven't heard from you in a while. Or, I'm not getting any younger. Or, I won't be around forever, so I need to spend time with my granddaughters. He's not shy to tell us what we should be doing in terms of involving him. Second is trying to buy us and make us feel indebted through thinly veiled offers to help. This is where I struggle the most. Years ago, he gifted us a large sum of money, which we've kept in savings, that he explained was to make us even with my brother-in-law, who he had lent the same amount of money to years prior and never received repayment or mention of repayment for. Father-in-law said that in doing so, he wouldn't have any worries of inequality at the time of his passing when his will was being executed. I wasn't super comfortable taking the money, but knowing it was to equalize with brother-in-law, it helped. Additionally, my father-in-law has given us significant gifts. He's paid to install a safety fence around our pool. I justified this as something for my daughters and gave us a new washer and dryer as a Christmas gift. I didn't really want either of these gifts to happen because I felt they wouldn't be guilt-free and because we were able to pay for them ourselves. But father-in-law practically begged us as he wanted to contribute as we had just moved into a new house. Additionally, my own parents had contributed similarly to our home as well. Again, another way I justified. It's obvious that his offers are a way to have control. In fact, following his fallout with brother-in-law, he quickly removed brother-in-law from his will, instead bequeathing his share to a local animal shelter. He did this, as he explained to us, because he knew if he left it all to my husband, he would feel compelled to share it with brother-in-law. Third and finally, he guilt trips us by constantly comparing what he gets to what my parents get in terms of time with us and my daughters. My parents are also local, much younger, they're 60, still working, have a house with a nursery and kids' toys and treats, and are equipped to take care of our kids. We see them every week or 2 weeks, but in general have more meaningful time with them too. We vacation with them, and they are the backup caretakers for our daughters, keeping them for nights or weekends when we're away, or being backup care on snow days or sick days. He's constantly whining about not having time as compared to them, and while we could explain all of the reasons that logistically my parents get more time with us and the girls, ultimately we prefer them because they are normal, loving, and supportive, no strings attached parents who on top of it all are people we enjoy being around. And of course I'm biased, but my husband fully agrees. So all this huge context aside, I'm really struggling on how to handle him. We've been living in a cycle of excuses on putting off seeing him and then seeing him when we have to throw him a bone, only to be guilted about it not being enough. Despite his terrible past, he's never explicitly done anything wrong to us, nor is there any tangible evidence I can point to explaining why I don't want him around. He obviously doesn't take feedback either, so a rational discussion about his behavior is off the table, and he is not a normal person who reads the room, so won't get a clue and back off. I'm just wondering, how much is he owed to see us, given all of this? He is a grandfather after all, and my daughters do have fun with him, but they have fun with everyone. And if the answer is nothing or not much, how do we manage making that happen? Gifts don't mean you have to do what someone says. It's okay to say that you're busy. You are busy. Give the whining the importance it deserves, which is not very much. If you want to be proactive about it, your husband can explain that the more he pushes and guilts, the less he will see you. If you honestly think you can train him into better behavior, that is. If nothing you do is ever going to be enough for him, why bother in the first place? Save your energy. Karen, my wife, gets busted stealing from my parents' house. Huge mistake. Background. My wife, who's 28, and I, 30 male, as well as my brother and his wife, went to visit our parents as we hadn't seen them in a while. My parents, who are 57, had a box of $300 ginseng in the fridge to be given as a gift for their close friend's wedding anniversary tomorrow. We know this because it came up in conversation during lunch. They also told us to help ourselves to anything in the fridge, but to not touch the ginseng for obvious reasons. The problem came when a few hours later, my parents called us in a panic, saying that they couldn't find the ginseng and asking if anyone had seen it. I didn't take it, and at first I thought they just misplaced it somewhere. However, they insisted that they both agreed on not moving it out of the fridge drawer for that exact reason. All of us denied taking it, and the conversation got more heated when my father started yelling that someone must have taken it, since it only went missing when we came to visit. All of us continued to deny taking it, with my wife being really quiet, and my father said that if it doesn't turn up, he'd have to have everyone's belongings checked. That was when my wife admitted that she took it. Apparently, it was some popular brand that my in-laws mentioned, and she wanted to give it to them, and she thought that no one would notice since it was an inconspicuous place in the fridge. My mother-in-law later called and said that my parents overreacted over such an inconsequential thing and screamed at me that I was a jerk for not defending my wife. The thing is, in my opinion, it wasn't a small thing. My wife literally stole hundreds of dollars from my parents and tried to lie her way out of it. While I agree that my parents shouldn't have started yelling and accusing us, I feel like my wife was in the wrong for taking the ginseng in the first place. This situation has caused a lot of friction, and we haven't been speaking since coming home. Am I the jerk? Update. After making the post, I thought a lot more about the situation. I realized after reading the comments that this indeed wasn't a one-time situation. Things in our house like face creams, kitchen utensils, and even household tools would go missing, and I would just believe my wife's excuses. I feel like such an idiot for not realizing it sooner, and honestly, I can't believe she took advantage of my trust like that. I guess a part of me refused to believe the truth, which was how she thought she could get away with it this time. When I brought up divorce, she immediately threatened to call the police to arrest me for being violent, when I had never done anything like that, so that I could never find a job again. So needless to say, my lawyer is being called, and this marriage will be over very soon. I've also apologized to my parents for all this awful behavior, and they've accepted. To be honest, this is probably the best ending, and I'm kind of glad this situation happened before it went on any longer. I'm incredibly done with my hopefully soon ex-wife and her side of the family, whose mother called me again yesterday entirely remorseless and called me a childless mama's boy. Thank you everyone for all the help and comments. And to clarify a few things, from what I'm aware, mother-in-law was aware of my wife's actions, especially since she had done this sort of thing before, taking things from our house to give to them, and didn't see anything wrong with it since neither of them liked my parents. And since it was going to be a short visit, like 2 hours tops, she thought no one was going to notice the missing ginseng before we left. Not the jerk. Your wife literally stole a $300 item from your parents, and her and her mother-in-law are mad that she got caught. Honestly, if my husband did that, I'd be having a long think about continuing the marriage. Not the jerk 100%. Honestly, it would have me rethinking the marriage, since she's revealed herself to be a liar and a thief, and I don't blame your parents for yelling. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you divorce her or not? Please let us know. What is it with people threatening to tell lies about you when you break up with them? Like, do you really think that's gonna win my heart back? I'll meet the call count, but I won't make the calls count. I worked at a call center for a collection agency for nearly 5 years. Anybody that has worked in this type of environment knows that there are all sorts of targets that are expected to be met. The daily, the monthly, whatever. One of our targets was to make a certain number of calls per day. I believe it was 120 calls. Naturally though, the more contact you would make with debtors, the less time there was to make other calls. It's usually not an issue, but some days you might make significantly more contact than others, and sometimes your call count might be like 2/3 of what it should be. We would get regular updates on the call count, and our manager would let us know if we were on track, and at the end of the day, they would give you the final results. I found it very annoying when you would have a successful day collecting debts and generating revenue for the company, only to have a manager dwell on your call count. Any protest such as, "Yes, I didn't meet the call count requirement, but hey, look at the revenue I generated today." It doesn't matter. The target must be met. Even if it wasn't a successful day, but I knew I still ended up spending much time in contact with these debtors in attempt to collect, I would ask managers to review my talk time to see that the efforts were being made to do what we're hired to do. It doesn't matter. The requirements must be met. Now, to be clear, a call only counted if someone picked up or the call went to a voicemail box that wasn't full. The system was unable to register events otherwise, meaning if you were to make hundreds of attempts in one day, only a fraction are registered. Everyone is aware of this, but it didn't matter to the company. Well, I was tired of the unfairness of it all. It also doesn't help that the company was grossly skimming our bonuses that our department's client provided to us as a reward for successfully collecting on these debts. It was really obvious when our bonuses became random numbers when it was only possible for them to be in multiples of 5. Frustrated with this literal theft and underappreciation of successful collection, the whole point of the job, I decided to comply with the call count expectations and never be under the target again. I created a notepad file with a list of all of the telephone numbers that went straight to voicemail. These are often numbers that have blocked us, or presumably the owner of the number has set it up as away or something like that. From then on, I made sure to make 15 to 20 calls per hour that would register, implying that even more calls were being made that they just couldn't see due to the way the system registered calls. I would spread these calls out so my activity wouldn't seem suspicious and would spend all day reading articles on the internet. Naturally, the revenue I had been generating decreased by about 80%. How come you're not collecting? Well, manager, you can see I am surpassing my call count target and my talk time is very low, so I'm just not getting the opportunities to do so. It should be noted that whatever I was collecting after doing so was really easy. The people whose accounts we received who could pay and wanted to pay anyway. Often these people would call us, so I just relied on that to make it appear like I was doing anything at all. They started giving me lower value portfolios to work, which was fine by me. You're stealing my bonus, the very incentive I have to do more work than the bare minimum anyway for a paycheck. I honestly thought I was quiet quitting, but no. I had a reputation as a valued member for our department and company, so no one wanted to fire me. I guess they just chalked up my lack of success to the bad portfolios they were assigning me. Steal my bonuses and dwell on a target that would be better judged as a marker of effort rather than an end-all be-all, and I couldn't care less. I was getting paid to read. This went on for nearly 2 years until I had to leave for mental health reasons. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.